Ever since I discovered Locust Mines as a combination support gem for Power Siphon, I've been convinced the skill was overpowered. I found this technology last patch in 3.24. In this patch, it appears to me that GGG is yet to find this technology because they just buffed Power Siphon quite significantly. I've already made like 2 videos on this technology, but basically we're equipping Locust Mines support gem to Power Siphon to effectively triple our damage. Power Siphon normally has an auto-targeting feature which makes it super smooth to use, even just by default as a basic ability, but we can almost triple our damage by equipping it with Locust Mines and just dealing with a slightly awkward, you have to be at least 3 meters away from your mines for them to trigger playstyle. It's the whole reason the build works as well as it does, and it's also why I'm convinced that GGG doesn't know about this technology. If they did know that we can use Locust Mines to triple our damage, I don't think they'd be giving it the buff that they are, effectively allowing us to completely replace Crown of Eyes with a different helmet. And also just embedding like 60% more damage into the build. So without any further ado, here's my build guide for Power Siphon Locust Mines for patch 3.25, Settlers of Kalguur. Hey, yo, whoa, hold up. We don't need all the fancy editing. Just get to the build guide, please. Thank you. Start off 3.25 by selecting a shadow from the character select screen, giving it some Chad-ass name, and then loading into the Twilight Strand. We're going to go ahead and attack the homeboy next to our friend, the Dying Exile, who unfortunately ends up dying. After grabbing the glass shank, kill this dude, this little zombie guy who's eating our friend, pick up his skill gem, Viper Strike, and then we're off to go kill Hillick. We're going to just skip through everything in our way, go straight to Hillick, kill him, and gain access to Lionized Watch. Talk to Tarkly, either pick up Cobra Lash or Explosive Trap and be on your way into the coast. You can also check the vendor for movement speed boots. I believe the suffix is called runner, so you can type 2 N's into the highlight items rejects if you want to look for runner boots. Either way, after doing that, head into the coast, and we're running straight past everything until we hit the waypoint. Then, before we go into the mudflats, we will do the medicine chest quest for Nessa. Kill Hellrake and then grab the medicine chest, of course, log out, log back in, then give it to Nessa and collect your Quicksilver movement speed flask for Zoomy. It's also a good time to mention that you should basically be picking up everything that you find off the ground and vendoring it for transmute shards. Vendor everything except for weapons or armor that have blue-green sockets. We will need at least 1 item that has that color combination. Venture forth through the mudflats, or as I like to call it, the hardest zone in the game. Find all the magic conch shells, make it into the submerged passage, hit up the waypoint immediately back to town, talk to Tarkly, and make sure that we get Frostblink and Bear Trap as our quest rewards. As a quick aside, and I did say this in my most recent Hardcore Solo Self-Found update to this build, but feel free to pick up armor bases early game and equip them if you are feeling at all squishy, especially through the mud flats. It will keep you alive. Anyways, make it to the ledge, then make it to the climb, then make it to the prison, kill Brutus, hit up the exit, go back to town, and get precision. Continue on through Act 1 into Merveil's Lair, and technically, as early as entering Merveil's Lair, you are allowed to go back to town, talk to Nessa, and collect Power Siphon. You could technically start the build at level 12 if you wanted to. And I have, for the record, multiple times throughout pretty much every character that I played, except for the first character that I played this character on, I've leveled it with Power Siphon as early as I possibly could have. But I don't really recommend you do that. I don't recommend you equip Power Siphon until you have a 4-link with Detonate Mines equipped with automation. That is when this build truly becomes a 1-button build, and that is when I think this build elevates into S tier when you hit that power spike of getting charged mines, automation equipped with Detonate Mines. You get that as early as level 31, I believe, in Act 3. To be super clear, the damage is more than enough with the 2-button playstyle as early as level 12. Just don't like it's something to adjust to. Not everybody's going to be down for it, and I don't want you guys hating this build before you really get a chance to sink your teeth into it. And actually, on the topic of the swap and the overall setup that we're doing with our skills, I wanted to just briefly break down what it is that we're actually doing to kill enemies. How are we interacting with these dudes? in case you didn't know what just the skill Power Siphon looks like by itself, I'm going to show you. This is what Power Siphon looks like. This is kind of more or less what our build is, except we're projecting it through mines and not our main hero. But this is what it looks like when it's cast on your main, I should say dude, your guy, your character. You're on your player character, casting Power Siphons like this has its own little cast animation, as you see. It auto-targets and doesn't send projectiles out unless it has targets to send projectiles out at. And I don't want to say it doesn't home in, like the projectile doesn't have any homing, but it again, it's auto-targeted, so it's always going to seek out the enemy that we focus it on. Now, so you've seen what the ability looks like by itself. Here's what it looks like with Locust Mines. I'm just going to push the ability a little bit before we actually get near enemies. When I push the skill with Locust Mines attached to Power Siphon, it shoots out 3 mines in an arc. And I've talked about this in multiple different videos, but basically, this arc expands outward. It becomes more concave the further out we throw the mines. So if we throw them super close, they're like super close to us in a small arc right here. If I throw them super far out, you can see the distance that they spread to becomes greater, right? They become further and further apart. What we want to focus on is making sure that whatever target we're trying to hit, so in single target situations, this is especially important. This is where this mostly applies. Whatever target we really want dead, we want to make sure that all 3 of these mines are hitting that target, as in when they detonate, they all fire projectiles at that target simultaneously. And this is pretty easy to achieve. This is not nearly as clunky as some people make it out, especially on Reddit. I'm looking at you guys on Reddit. But it is something that you have to adjust to. It's going to take, like, you're going to have to play the build and get better at it. I'm not saying it's hard, but it is something you have to get used to. And I just want to highlight that specifically in this build guide video. So against monsters, I'm going to show you guys one more time. We walk up to them. If I throw the mines super close, you see they don't even detonate while I'm pushing the button. I'm pushing the button. You can see the animations going off, but the mines are detonating. This is basically like a non-melee build. This is like the opposite of a melee build. You're like a howitzer, okay? You're like a big long-range cannon. Okay, you have insane damage, but only at range, and it's just something that you're going to have to take to get used to. The range really isn't that far away. You can be pretty close and still do pretty much 100% damage effectiveness, right? As long as all 3 of these mines fire, I'm getting all my damage. That one didn't until I moved away. We don't have far shot or anything is what I'm trying to say. Like, we don't have, like, the further you are, the more damage you're doing. No, it's just a sweet spot that you have to make sure that you're at least outside of, basically. Make sure you're outside of the sweet spot, you got 100% of your damage. If you're in the sweet spot, you got 0% of your damage. Just make sure that you're, in that outside of that sweet spot where the mines aren't triggering, and you mostly should be okay. For the Bandit reward in Act 2, I am actually going to be helping Kraytlin. All of the rewards that they've reworked the bandits into seem at least worth 1 passive skill point, by the way. I don't think any of them are incorrect choices. And especially if you're newer to the game, I think I'd help Alira to help with my early game gearing to shore up my resistances. Something that changed pretty significantly about the build from last patch to this patch is the call to arms nerf, or I guess I should call it adjustment. Call to arms, in case you didn't know, last patch was like the most broken thing ever. You could use call to arms with any warcry to get the effects of that warcry for like very little mana and nothing else. I guess 2 sockets, a little bit of mana, and you just get rotating warcry buffs up almost permanently. It was insane. People were using that, I was using that in my build, to make Enduring Cry nearly permanent, which in addition to giving you endurance charges, which even last patch were really freaking strong, right? But this patch are crazy broken. 4% fizz and 4% LE reduction per charge. That's crazy. It's no secret that it was a really broken technology that everybody was using, call to arms, and so they adjusted it, and I'd say they mostly nerfed it. Call to arms now, it's called auto exertion. It's going to cost 15% mana just for getting a warcry on, plus you're still going to have to pay the mana for that warcry every time it triggers. However, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all sad. As you can see here, it actually grants increased cooldown recovery rate. Like, this is just a straight up buff. It now grants 0 to 19% increased CDR, previously 30 to 11% reduced. The warcries will even be triggering more often now than they were previously. And the warcries themselves got changed, and I want to especially highlight Enduring Cry, which was the warcry that I was using on the build. So Enduring Cry no longer grants a brief burst of life regen or a buff which grants additional resistances and physical damage reduction based on your endurance charge. I just say additional there because, of course, endurance charges naturally grant granted resistances and PDR, but now they're going to grant no resistances, additional elemental resistance reduction. That's a little bit confusing. Basically, endurance charges on players and minions no longer grant 4% LE res per charge. They now grant 4% additional LE damage reduction. This is huge. This is massive. Your endurance charges are now going to scale the top end of your elemental damage mitigation as opposed to the bottom end, if you kind of understand what I'm saying. Like before, they just helped get your resistances up, which was kind of meaningless unless you can keep them up permanently, because there's no way you'd ever build around the little bit of resistances that they could give. That's why I call it it was the bottom end. It was like, hey, if you can keep endurance charges permanently, you can factor them into your build with respect to the resistances that they're giving you. But other than that, you pretty much can't. They're helping you against exposure. I don't know. It's nice for the physical damage reduction, though. They were always nice for that. Now, not only do endurance charges cover you on the physical end, they also cover you on the elemental damage end, making them crazy broken. This is like your one-stop shop to make any character feel significantly tankier across the board, I guess, except for against chaos damage. Endurance charges are crazy broken. I assume every build will try to fit them in some capacity. The way that this matters to us is that I want to get endurance charges on this build now more than ever. And Enduring Cry still gives them, as well as a consistent regen buff. I think we can really make use of both of these lines here. I wanted to go over a couple of trees real briefly. I'm of course going to link these down below for you guys to dissect, but I want to especially cover the late game variant of this build because I don't feel like there's a lot of resources out there really discussing or other than on my channel, of course, diving in deep as to how you scale this build with int stacking. And I feel like I accomplished that pretty well, so I want to go over it real briefly. So this is my config for my like Giga Juiced out God character, level 100. He's here, right here. Your mine is mine. This character, I pretty much played this character for like a month straight, dude. I'd be very scared to type this button in. 21 days logged last league. I do leave my character logged in overnight, but man, I played a lot of PoB last league. I actually did enjoy Necropolis in every way except for the league mechanic. It was a very fun league for me. Yeah, I want to break down this character. I want to show you guys what this character is doing right and what this character is doing wrong. So, well, mostly what it's doing right, because it completely tears all the content up in the entire game, including it farms tier 17s like they're going out of style. So, going over this tree real briefly, it's a pretty standard INT-stacker tree, I feel like, for Trickster. It kind of looks like a Tron bike, I will admit. Somebody in my chat said that when I was putting this build together a few months back, and I definitely resonated with that a bit. I'll go over the standout decisions that I've made in this build, because I do think I'm doing different things than you'll find on most PoE ninjas. So first things first, I'm running 2 split personalities. These are the int and ES. These are mostly for the int, as you can imagine. We are an int stacking build, so we're doing this to get int. The ES is nice, but it does not scale our damage directly with Tranquility, unfortunately. But altogether, we're getting like something to the tune of about 100 intelligence from both of these put together almost. I think it's worth it, especially when you consider that I'm shoving them in a large cluster jewel that is just giving me so much intelligence. This is a pretty juicy cluster jewel. I spent quite a long time rolling this thing, and obviously I had to buy the fractured base, which was not cheap. But again, this is like super late game, super aspirational. All of these are things that you can work towards, pieces, if you will, of the build that you can work towards. I think I bought this Lethal Pride for something like 30 to 20 div. This thing gives me chance to intimidate, Fizz taken as RIP. I wonder if this is getting nerfed. I think it is. They said that they were nerfing most sources of Fizz taken as. Chance to deal double damage and 20 fire res that I am using. I'm actually a little bit under. Technically at cap for fire res when Enduring Cry buff is active, which it like literally always is. We're going to go over that tech in a second. But yeah, it's not at my actual cap of 84 because, of course, I'm using a Mage Blood. So, yeah, altogether, this character is easily worth mirrors, right? I have a +1 power charge ring that I'm duping with Calandra's Touch. This character is not fair, okay? Look at my chest piece. Look at this thing. This thing is like a triple fractured, tier 1 spell suppression, essence rolled int, slammed attributes. I got grand and exquisite implicits. Like, this thing's probably worth, like, I don't even want to get... I have a very geared out character, okay? But I think the PoB speaks for itself. This character clears everything. There is not a piece of content that this character is even remotely challenged by except for tier 17s, which it's really not challenged by except for the ones that just turn off the build, right? There's a few tier 17s, tier 17 modifiers. Like, I think the debuff expired one is like bugged. I hope that gets fixed. There's one that literally makes it so mines don't work. Mines literally do not work. And it doesn't say like your mines will not work. It's something like debuffs on enemies have a chance to expire 100% quicker. And for some reason, that just means your mines don't work straight up. They literally won't fire. So hopefully T17s get adjusted such that this build feels better to run them, because I swear this is a really powerful character, guys. I promise you. Can farm tier 17s. Just can't farm all of them because I don't think any build in the game can. But yeah, to dissect some of the choices a little bit, I think I already mentioned we're pathing this way for the purposes of optimizing split personality. That's why I don't connect here and go for Written in Blood and try to do something like convert the life given to ES with a unique jewel or something. Mostly obvious choices though. I do go for Instinct over Inveterate. I do like Inveterate a lot, or Inveterate, whatever it is. I like this wheel a lot for getting spell suppression, but I just couldn't make the passive points work. Doing pretty obvious things. Intelligence is added to your accuracy with 1. This is basically like to the tune of like 1300 accuracy, and almost single-handedly solves your accuracy, I think, by itself. If we go to my accuracy, you can see I'm at 195. I'm not running precision, even though I could probably run a level 1 precision. It would be completely useless. My crit strike chance is capped at all times, all daylight hours, no exceptions, because of course we're rocking that Ralakesh's. I even got the +2 corrupted implicit on it, so that my auras that I'm popping in here are getting extra value out of them. I am running Discipline. Traded out Skitterbots for Discipline. When you go CI, Discipline is a nice aura to run, because look at that, you get like 2,000 energy shield from it. Of course, that doesn't scale your damage with Tranquility of Mind, unfortunately, or Transfiguration of Soul. But actually, on that topic, we are getting a healthy amount of scaling for Transfiguration of Soul due to all of our intelligence. Our intelligence gives us 1% increased energy shield per 5 int, and Transfiguration of Soul reads increase and reductions to max ES also apply to spell damage. So this is giving us maximum energy shield. It's giving us 1%. I think what really makes this scaling intelligence to scale our damage so absurdly broken, and this is a feature that's just going to be built into the skill gem next patch. What I think makes this vector of scaling your int to scale your damage so broken is the Crown of Eyes. It's that increases and reductions to spell damage also apply to attacks at 150% of their value. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane, because again, you have to consider we're scaling our intelligence as just a straight value we can find on gear, right? So the sky's really the limits with our int, and that means that the sky's really the limit with our spell damage, because that's how we're scaling. That's one part of how we're scaling, a big part of how we're scaling our damage, right? We're getting spell damage per intelligence. So when I get spell damage per int, and I have 1300 int, that's a lot of spell damage. And then when I'm multiplying all that spell damage by 1.5 because Crown of Eyes, or next patch because Power Siphon just is that way, it's not hard to imagine how this can get absurd quickly, especially when you start throwing in other engines of scaling your damage, like Tranquility. It's like, boom, now my energy is scaling my spell damage, which is scaling my damage at 1.5x, right? All of this comes together to just make a really absurd and efficient damage scaling vector, or engine as I call it. It's just like so disgusting how we can just stack int and get insane returns from all of it, both on the defensive and the offensive side. And this is typically like the cornerstone, or like the pillar of what makes a broken character in Poe, right? Crip said it best, and he said it early on too when he was playing this game, that when you're scaling damage and defense at the same time, especially when you're just like doing it with an engine, right? Like I am with intelligence, I'm just get more int, get more damage, get survivability. It scales your damage in like 3, 4, 5 vectors, and that's like the main takeaway for going the int stacking variant, is to swap over to an int stacker, you basically need to create a reason for your build to want intelligence. And the main / easiest way to do that by far is just to pick up a wand like this, right? If you want to get into this variant of the build, right? If you want to you want to become a hero with this build, you want to become immortal, you want to become 56 million DPS legend, you need to grab a wand like this. You need to grab an int stacker wand, or a wand that has those two lines, the adds X damage to attacks with this weapon per int, and the increased spell damage per int. Those two mods on a weapon like this, and then if you can roll it well beyond that, I have a video on this that you can go check to roll a wand just like this, where you get like double damage and some attributes or attack speed at the end there. One like this will basically carry your ability to leverage intelligence all on its own, right? You just get a wand like this and gear that has int, and that's all you really need to get like 40, 50 million, 30 to 40 million DPS. And then I take it a bit further, of course, not by like with items like this, Eyes of the Great Wolf, or like crazy little flex items. I kind of, like I said, this is a aspirational build to work towards this. I want to help you guys configure your build in PoB because it can be a little bit tricky, especially since we're doing a mine build. I didn't, in the last clip, I did not have my Wise Oak active. Obviously, all of these flasks are active because my level 100 character has a mage blood, but with the Wise Oak active, as you can see, by the way, note on the Wise Oak, it's a nice way for me to get 5% more damage and short my resistances. So that's why I popped it in. As you can see, my Fizz max hit like doesn't triple, but it goes up quite significantly with the Wise Oak active, which it pretty much always is, in mapping and most boss content. Because here's another cool thing about the Wise Oak. It's a bismuth flask, so it lasts like 10 seconds with quality. It's pretty nice. I wanted to cover how to config the character. Make sure that when you have your, you don't need the Val version of Power Siphon, by the way. We're doing nothing with the Val Power Siphon. You can't throw a mine that uses Val Power Siphon. All of your mines have to be Power Siphon based. So it's completely irrelevant. If you want to skip out on the Val version of Power Siphon, that's totally fine. But even getting a level 21 Power Siphon isn't like the most necessary thing in the world. It's like just a couple, I mean, you can even just see right here, right? If I de-level it, it's not that much damage. Like this build from a gems leveling perspective, if you're going the int stacking variant, gem levels really do not matter that much. They just increase your flat, the base damage a little bit, but because we're scaling so much flat already in another way with intelligence, it's quite irrelevant. But you know, that's besides the point. The way you want to do this is you come into your build, you go to main skill, you need to select Val Power Siphon, and every single time you log in, I noticed I've had to do this too. You got to go in every single time and click off Val Power Siphon because it's going to want to auto default on. So click this off, go to the count, type in 3 because however quick your mine throwing speed is, that will directly influence your DPS, but you can only ever throw 3 mines at a time, so I only ever want to measure my damage with 3 mines out. And then you hit this button, it'll tell you roughly your DPS, and then you want to go into your config and change things around even further. So for instance, like my build does not abuse exposure because I've got the inversion mastery. I didn't want to screw around with it. Maybe that's an extra 2 million DPS, I don't know. I'm regularly shocking bosses for like 50%, but then uber pinnacle bosses, I probably don't get a 50% shock on them, so I just put this at 30, and I'm not doing anything else, right? I guess I am doing intimidate. Oof, 3 million DPS. So I am intimidating the mobs, but that's pretty much it. You don't even need to click these when you have Ralakesh's Impatience active because it just counts these as active all the time. And then that's pretty much it. I think if you have destructive devices, or sorry, what is it called again? Devastating devices? If you have successive detonations, I don't know how I messed that one up, there'd be a like mines triggered recently option that you could select to, you know, be a little bit more accurate with your single target if you want to test to see like how much damage do I have after 10 mines. But regardless of that, this is kind of more or less how you configure your character. I also wanted to show, oh yes, there is a defensive set of rotating buffs that we have going that we want to not account for, I guess sometimes. Basically what I'm trying to say is we don't want to assume that our Enduring Cry is active for the purposes of measuring our defenses, right? So let's go ahead and unenable these and then also unenable Immortal Call. You will need to do this if you want to find out a more accurate representation of your hit pool. It just is what it is. But yeah, without Immortal Call up, we are at like, you know, 98,000 Fizz max or effective HP pool with a relatively low Fizz max hit. I will say that's probably the weakest thing that this build has to deal with, especially now that we're losing, right? If I go scroll over, oh, we still got Fizz taking his max, even though this is not a new passive tree. I don't know if that's just because it has yet to update, but the Fizz pool is a little weak. We're still like ungodly amounts of tanky to Fizz damage, right? 13k, I bet we could tank like a Shaper Slam, but I have not tested that. I'll be fair and honest and say I've not tested Shaper Slams. Basically the only thing that kills me is tier 17s and like dumb things that I'm doing in Uber bosses that I like Uber Sirius can kill me because fuck that fight. But yeah, that's basically what's going on with your configs. And then this tree right here is like a more reasonable day 2 or maybe day 1 tree for you. I've got I think it's a level 89 character right here. This is the character that was, you were seeing footage for. This character just got his 4 watchstones, and he did it all with basically just a replica High Desire. All of his other gear is complete trash. Stuff that I found off the ground either through leveling or in early maps before I went and just got my watchstones. I'm just kind of briefly scrolling over it so you can take a look. But yeah, especially like look at that wand, man, that thing is so trash. I don't have my flasks pop because I don't have a mage blood, so I don't feel like it's necessary or wise rather to show you my with flask survivability. This character's still reasonably tanky. Main weakness being chaos resistance, and I did actually pick up an amethyst flask for that. I think if I just popped that, my survivability would like, okay, not that much. Chaos resistance is still definitely a problem. I was even thinking about going for tolerance, but that's like a totally different discussion. Yeah, just a pretty generic tree for early leveling, or I should say like early endgame, really, before you've got anything particularly nasty. I did drop through the campaign a divine orb, so that was how I like justified pulling a replica High Desire out of my stash. Was I dropped the divine orb, and I was like, okay, I'd just go buy an item with this. It probably wouldn't be replica High Desire. I just want to say replica High Desire is for like 5 or 6 div. It's pretty expensive to like get to say like, oh, just go beat the game with this item. You could do it with other less expensive uniques, I guess, namely, although I don't know how much this is going to cost next league, I only assume this is going to be even more expensive. But like Ralakesh's Impatience, if you pick those boots up, you can go beat the game with just those boots and then gear that's somewhat planned around it. You can pick those up and then like a Malachai's Loop for 5C and have like 10, maybe even 15 million DPS alone. But really, honestly, just 3 million DPS, all you really need to beat the game. The boss fights are going to be a little slow, but they're pretty darn safe. I don't think I 6 portaled anything, or even like 5 or 4 portaled. Maven got me down to 3. I did die a few times, only in Maven's last phase, just because, you know, got to practice the fight more, I guess. And then Shaper and Elder were a pain, too. But that was because I was Maven witnessing them, and that was just not, like, it's not wise. You shouldn't fight those bosses on your first time Maven Witness. That's a little bit too much. Did my ascendancies in this order. I went 1 step ahead first, then I went for Swift Killer, then I went for Polymath, and then I went for Heartstopper. And then once I got the Soul of Nasser and Sumter, I swapped off of 1 step ahead and Heartstopper to get into Escape Artist and Spellbreaker. I especially made this jump when I obtained Replica High Desire. I think actually I didn't make this jump until I had a pretty well-rolled chess piece. A couple last pieces of tech. I am running a Precision, and I'm actually running it with Arrogance, so its reservation cost is ran against my life instead of my mana. Some tech that I actually picked up from Jung Roan's version of this build, although I will say I don't really like it. I think I'd prefer, especially since next patch we're kind of getting this mastery built into the ability, I think I would actually prefer to take the intelligences added to accuracy with wands and then run like a lower level precision maybe against my mana and try to get mana more. I'm not entirely sure, but what I do know is that this HP pool is going to be smaller on day 1 or day 2 because I'm not going to have a replica High Desire. So I'm going to have way less energy shield, right? If I just unequip this, you see I lose like over 1,000 energy shield. So I'm definitely not going to have this much energy shield provided to me via Escape Artist on day 1 or 2. So I that combined with the fact that I do feel very squishy to chaos damage are leading me to think that I could just be a little bit tankier, especially from the life perspective, just my overall life pool. So I feel like I'm gonna try to experiment with ways around running precision. A couple other things. I've gone over this elemental mastery for 25% chance to treat mobs as inverted. I've gone over this in a video. I've explained how this benefits our build, but if you don't care to know the details of that build, you don't want to go watch it. Basically, as long as your curses do not reduce the resistances of the monster, of any mobs, and you're not doing things like trying to reduce their resistances, maybe through things like exposure, penetration is fine, but reducing their resistances isn't. As long as you're not trying to reduce enemy resistances, you can run this mastery, and basically your hits have a 25% chance to take their the enemy's elemental resistances, and as it says, it will invert them. So if they have like 50 lightning res, you're gonna 25% of the time invert that value into negative 50 lightning res, which is very powerful. And again, a big reason why I don't go for curses that reduce the mob's elemental resistances. So in a similar vein, we go for Whispers of Doom because we can actually make use of punishment as well as Sniper's Mark. This is a pretty darn big boost to your single target for only 4 passive points. I would highly recommend this early game. Later on, this can be annoying to double cast curses. You can do things like an Arcanist brand, but I don't even know if I'd bother. I mean, look, usually when you're playing a Shadow and you're this close to Whispers of Doom, you just take it, right? For 4 passive points, this is usually like 15 to 20% more damage, no questions asked. But there is a real cost to having to double curse in fights that's, you know, and Arcanist brand costs more gem slots. So you do what you want with that. I will probably play around with an Arcanist brand setup, but I just, it's awkward. Okay, it's awkward. This is awkward. Going over the strengths and weaknesses, I'd say this build excels at doing any kind of content that, it's really just an all-rounder, this build is, but I don't like temporal bubbles. I do not like them at all on this build, and so I'd say, like, what is that? Blight? I think Blight has a fair number of temporal bubbles. I feel like I notice them most in that kind of content. Like residence maps, right? The map where you fight Dominus at the end, the mob type in that enemy in that tile set is I can't remember the name of it, but they cast temporal bubbles. They cast the shields, the proximity shields. Those things are really annoying on this build because honestly, it's hard to even hit one target with your abilities. The projectiles often just hit the bubble through, or they hit the bubble on the outside and it does no damage and it's annoying as shit. And yeah, other than that, I don't really think I have anything else to say. Good luck playing my favorite build for sure, by far. And the build that I feel the most proud of, every build I've ever played, I kind of tinker more and more with a base template that somebody else gave me. But here I really did just wing most of this, man. Like I got with PoE Ninja as inspiration, I just kind of like took what people were using Power Siphon for and then made a build out of it. And that was the video that you guys all saw, right? The 20,000 view one. And then in the comment section to that video, somebody was just like, yo, bro, throw Locust Mines on it. And I just went to town. And this was the result. So I'm quite happy with what we got. And I'm sure you will be too if you play this build. So much so that I do expect this build to get nerfed at some point in the future. Maybe next patch, maybe 2 patches down the road. I genuinely do not think that GGG knows that you can use Locust Mines with Power Siphon to completely ignore Locust Mines downside while still milking the 3x multiplier that it gives you to your damage. I don't think they know. I just don't think they know about that. So if they do, they're insane for buffing Power Siphon in the way they did because it definitely didn't need it. And if they don't know about it, then it's only a matter of time before an interaction like this comes to their attention and they nerf it in one of the many different ways that GGG is known for nerfing these kinds of things. Maybe they'll hit it with the GGG triple nerf, who knows. But in any case, that's it. I'm out. Good luck with 3.25. Good luck with everything, putting the build together. If you have any questions at all, definitely leave them down below. I will answer any question you have about this build. Any question you have. If you have the craziest question in the world, you ask it, I will answer it. So thank you very much for your time, and you have a great night.